A simple act of kindness at a diner changes the life of a struggling waitress and, in the process, transforms the world of a billionaire and his son. Rain tapped softly against the diner windows as Emily wiped down the counter for what felt like the 100th time that day. The smell of coffee, bacon, and old floor cleaner mixed in the air, something she had grown used to over the years. Her apron was faded, and her shoes ached from standing since sunrise, but she kept a small, tired smile on her face. It was another long day at the Silver Spoon Diner, a small place on the edge of town that saw more regulars than tourists. Emily had been working there since she was 19. Now 26, she was still there, still trying to make ends meet. Her mother was sick at home, and the medical bills seemed to grow faster than her paycheck. Every dollar she made was already spent before payday even came. Yet no one could say she ever complained. She was the kind of person who found a reason to smile even when the world gave her none. That afternoon, when the rain started pouring harder, the diner emptied out. Only a few truckers sat in the corner booths, nursing cups of black coffee. The bell above the door jingled, and Emily looked up automatically, ready to welcome whoever came in. But what she saw made her pause. A tall man in a dark suit stepped inside, holding an umbrella in one hand and pushing a wheelchair with the other. In the chair sat a little boy, maybe 8 or 9 years old, with big, curious eyes and thin arms. His small hands trembled slightly as he tried to adjust his napkin on his lap. The man looked exhausted, like someone who carried too much weight on his shoulders. "Good afternoon," Emily said warmly, stepping forward. "You can take any seat you like." The man nodded politely and chose a quiet corner by the window. He parked the wheelchair carefully and helped the boy settle. Emily noticed the tenderness in his movements. It wasn't just duty, it was love. She brought over menus, but the boy struggled to hold his. His fingers shook too much, and the paper kept slipping. Without thinking twice, Emily crouched beside him and smiled. "Hey there, sweetheart. Would you like me to read it for you?" The boy looked up shyly, then nodded. His father started to say something but stopped watching instead. "So," Emily said gently, showing the pictures on the laminated page, "we've got pancakes, fries, burgers. Oh, and milkshakes. I think you'd like the chocolate one." The boy's eyes lit up. "Chocolate," he said slowly, his voice slightly slurred but full of effort. "Good choice," Emily said with a grin. "One chocolate milkshake coming right up." As she stood to take their order, the man gave her a quiet thank you. His voice was deep, steady, but there was a sadness in it. "It's hard for him to eat sometimes," he said softly. "I hope that's not a problem." Emily shook her head. "Not at all. Don't worry about a thing. We'll take good care of you both." When she brought their food, pancakes shaped like smiley faces for the boy and coffee for the manche, noticed the boy struggling again, trying to hold the fork. The man reached over to help, but the boy frowned in frustration, tears forming in his eyes. Emily's heart squeezed. She knelt down again, this time more gently than before. "Hey, it's okay," she said kindly. "How about I help you a little, We'll make it a team effort." The boy nodded hesitantly. She cut a small piece of pancake and held it up. "Ready?" she said. The boy opened his mouth, and she fed him slowly, making funny faces to make him laugh. Soon, his giggles filled the quiet corner. The father watched silently. His eyes softened as he saw his son laugh, something that didn't happen often. He looked at Emily like he was trying to understand how a stranger could be so gentle, so patient. Between bites, Emily chatted with the boy. "What's your name?" she asked. "Ethan," he said proudly. "That's a strong name," she said. "You know, I once had a friend named Ethan. He said people with that name are super brave." The boy smiled, clearly pleased. His father chuckled quietly, but his laugh sounded like it hadn't been used in a long time. Emily turned to the man. "And you're his dad, I assume?" "Yes," he replied. "David Lawson." She offered her hand and he shook it lightly. His grip was firm, his skin cool. Up close, she noticed that his suit was expensive, probably more than she made in a month, but he carried himself without arrogance. Just quiet exhaustion. She had no idea he was one of the richest men in the country. To her, he was just another tired father who needed kindness. As they finished their meal, Ethan showed her his small toy car. "My mom gave me this," he said. Before she went to heaven, Emily froze for a second, unsure what to say. Then she smiled softly. "She must have loved you very much," she said. "And I think she'd be really proud of you." David looked down, his jaw tightening. There was pain in his eyes that words couldn't touch. Emily didn't press. She just refilled his coffee and quietly made sure Ethan's napkin stayed in place when they were ready to leave. David stood and thanked her again. "You've been very kind," he said sincerely. Emily waved it off. "Just doing my job." But he shook his head slightly. "No," he said. "You did more than that." Handed her a tip generous. But not too much and left with Ethan. The bell above the door jingled again. And just like that, they were gone. Emily stood for a moment, watching them through the window as they disappeared into the rain. Something about them stayed with her. The look in the father's eyes, the little boy's smile, it all felt different somehow. The rest of her shift went by slowly. She couldn't stop thinking about Ethan. She wondered what it was like to live with a disability, to depend on others for simple things. She wondered how hard it must be for his father, raising him alone. That night after closing, Emily sat in the empty diner, sipping leftover coffee. Her feet ached, her hands were sore, but her mind was somewhere else. She thought about how tired David had looked, and how Ethan's laugh had changed the air in that room. She didn't know who they really were. Didn't know that she had just served one of the most powerful men in the state. To her, they were just two people who needed kindness, and she had given it without thinking twice, before heading home. She wrote a small note on a napkin and stuck it on the counter near the cash register. "Be kind. You never know what someone's going through." Weeks later, she would find out just how true those words were. But for now, she simply locked the diner door, stepped into the cool night air, and hoped that the man and his son made it home safely. She had no idea that her small act of kindness feeding a little boy a few bites of pancake was about to change her life forever. The next few weeks passed quietly for Emily. Every day felt the same, wiping down tables, serving coffee, and smiling through exhaustion. But there was one thing that made her days brighter. Every few days, the man and his little boy came back. The bell above the door would chime, and she would look up to see Ethan's big smile as his father carefully guided the wheelchair inside. She always felt a little flutter of happiness when she saw them. It wasn't romantic. It was something softer, something that warmed her heart. Ethan had that effect on people. His laughter was pure, the kind that made even the grumpiest customer smile. And his father, David, though quiet and serious, had started to relax a little around her. "Hey, my favorite team," Emily would say when they walked in. Ethan would giggle, and David's lips would twitch into the smallest smile. The diner staff had noticed their visits too. Some of the waitresses whispered that the man looked rich, maybe some businessman from the city. Emily didn't pay attention to gossip. To her, they were just her favorite customers. One slow afternoon, the diner was nearly empty when they came in again. Emily walked over with her notepad. "The usual?" she asked. Ethan nodded eagerly. "Chocolate pancakes." David chuckled softly. "And I'll take the same coffee as last time," he said. Emily leaned down to Ethan's level. "I might just have to rename those pancakes after you," she teased. "Ethan's special." The boy's eyes widened with excitement. "Really?" "Of course," she said. "You earned it." She turned to leave. David spoke quietly. "You don't have to be this kind, you know." "We're not." "Special." Emily looked back and smiled. "Everyone deserves kindness," she said. "Especially people who smile like he does." David didn't reply, but his eyes softened again, the same way they did the first time she met him. When she returned with their food, she stayed a few minutes to talk with Ethan. He told her about his favorite cartoon, how he liked cars, and that he wanted to build a flying wheelchair one day so he could see the clouds. "That's a pretty awesome dream," she said. "And you know what? I think you'll do it someday," Ethan giggled. "Daddy says dreams take work." David looked up from his coffee. "That's right," he said with a gentle smile. Emily nodded. "Then I guess we all better keep working." It became a little tradition after that. Whenever they visited, Emily made sure Ethan got his Ethan special. She'd decorate his pancakes with chocolate syrup smiles and whipped cream stars. The boy loved it, and David started bringing small flowers for her, just daisies. Nothing fancy. He said they were from Ethan. But Emily had a feeling it was his quiet way of saying thank you. But not everyone in the diner appreciated her attention. One evening, while she was helping Ethan with his food, the manager, Mr. Harlan, stood by the counter watching. He was a tall man with a sharp nose and an even sharper tongue. He didn't like when waitresses spent too much time chatting with customers instead of turning over tables quickly. After David and Ethan left that night, he called Emily to the back. "You're getting too attached to that man and his kid," he said bluntly. Emily frowned. "Attached? I'm just doing my job." "No," he said, crossing his arms. "You're spending 10 minutes at one table while others are waiting. This isn't a charity, Emily. You get paid to serve, not to play babysitter." Her cheeks flushed. "He's not just any customer. The boy needs a little help eating, that's all. You'd do the same if you had a heart." The manager's eyes narrowed. "Watch your tone. You're lucky you have a job here." Emily bit her tongue. She wanted to tell him off, but she needed this job. The rent was due soon, and her mother's medicine wasn't cheap. "I understand," she said quietly, turning to leave. David had overheard the whole thing. He had come back inside because Ethan forgot his toy car on the table. He stood silently near the door, listening as Emily took the scolding without raising her voice. Her hands trembled slightly, but she didn't fight back. When she walked out of the kitchen, she almost bumped into him. "Oh?" she gasped, surprised. "Did you forget something?" He held up Ethan's small toy car. "He left this behind." Emily smiled, though her eyes looked a little wet. "He'd be heartbroken if he lost it." "Thank you." David looked at her for a long moment. "You didn't deserve that," he said quietly. Emily shook her head. "It's fine. I need the job." He studied her face, the tired eyes, the faint circles under them, the way she still managed to smile through everything. There was a strength in her that most people didn't notice. "You have a good heart, Emily," he said. "Most people wouldn't have cared the way you do." She shrugged lightly. "Maybe, but kindness doesn't cost anything, does it?" He smiled faintly, almost sadly. "Sometimes it costs more than people realize." When she went home that night, she couldn't shake his words. There was something about David that intrigued her. He wasn't just another customer. He carried pain, deep, quiet pain that he hid behind polite smiles. She wondered what his life was like, what he did for a living, and how he managed everything alone. The next morning, the diner buzzed with gossip. One of the waitresses claimed she saw David get into a luxury car with a driver. Another said she thought she'd seen his face in a magazine once. Emily brushed it off. "Who cares what he drives?" she said. "He's a good dad. That's what matters." Still, a small part of her wondered if there was truth to it. The next time they came in, the air felt different. Ethan was in high spirits, waving at her from across the diner. But David looked more distant, distracted even. She brought their usual order, trying to lighten the mood. "Ethan," she said playfully, "if I keep feeding you pancakes, you're going to have to start helping me wash dishes." Ethan laughed so hard his small shoulders shook. David's expression softened a little. "He'd probably enjoy that," he said. As she fed Ethan, she noticed the way David watched them. Not with pity or admiration, something deeper. A mix of gratitude and something he couldn't quite explain. Maybe it was the way she treated Ethan as normal, not as someone broken or fragile. She didn't stare at his wheelchair, didn't talk down to him. She just saw him as a boy who liked pancakes and chocolate milk. That night, after they left, Emily sat at the counter, staring out the window. The rain had returned, tapping softly on the glass, just like the first day they met. She wondered if they'd keep coming back, or if one day they'd simply disappear from her world like so many others had. But what she didn't know was that David Lawson Quiet, tired and rich beyond imagination, had already made up his mind about her. He had seen enough to know she wasn't like everyone else. She didn't treat people based on who they were or what they had, and that made her different. For Emily, life would continue as usual for a little while longer. serving coffee, paying bills, taking care of her mother. But something had already begun to change. Her small act of kindness had left a mark on someone, with the power to change her world completely. And somewhere in the back of that black SUV as they drove away, David glanced at his son, who was clutching his toy car and smiling. "Daddy," Ethan said sleepily. "Emily's my favorite person." Oh, David smiled faintly. "Mine too, buddy," he whispered. Neither of them knew that fate was already working quietly in the background, pulling their lives together in a way none of them could have imagined. It was a bright Saturday morning when Emily walked into the diner, still half asleep from her early shift. The sun poured through the windows, and the smell of pancakes and sizzling bacon filled the air. Saturdays were always busy families, truckers, and tourists, all stopping in for breakfast. She tied her apron, brushed back her hair, and started taking orders as the bell above the door jingled. Non-stop. She didn't expect that today would change everything. Around mid-morning, while balancing a tray full of coffee cups, she heard the familiar laughter that made her heart lift. She turned and saw Ethan waving from the doorway, his tiny hand flapping excitedly as his father, David, pushed the wheelchair inside. But something was different this time. They weren't alone. Behind them were two men in black suits, earpieces glinting under the lights. The moment they stepped in, the chatter in the diner softened. Everyone turned to look. Emily blinked, confused. She had never seen David with bodyguards before. He always came quietly, almost trying not to be noticed. But today, his presence seemed larger, heavier. "Emily," Ethan called out, his face lighting up. "We came back." She smiled automatically, even though her heart raced a little. "Of course you did," she said cheerfully, walking over. "Couldn't stay away from my pancakes, huh?" Ethan giggled, and David smiled faintly. "You know how persuasive he can be," he said in his calm voice. The two suited men followed them to the booth standing nearby. That alone was enough to make everyone whisper. The manager, Mr. Harlan, hurried forward, suddenly all smiles. "Good morning, gentlemen," he said, wiping his hands nervously on his apron. "Right this way, please. I'll take care of you personally." But before he could reach for the menus, David stopped him with a simple glance. "Thank you," he said evenly, "but Emily will take care of us." The manager froze. Emily looked up in surprise, not understanding what was happening. David turned to her. "If that's all right with you?" She nodded quickly. "Of course." Mr. Harlan forced a stiff smile. "Certainly, Mr. Dash." He hesitated, clearly unsure how to address him. David looked at him calmly. "Lawson, David Lawson." The name dropped like a stone into the room. A few people gasped. One of the waitresses dropped her pen. Even the cook peeked out from the kitchen window. Everyone in the small town had heard that name before. David Lawson, the billionaire CEO of Lawson Technologies. One of the biggest tech companies in the country. Emily's mind went blank. She had served him pancakes and wiped syrup off his son's chin. She had talked to him about cartoons and dreams without. Knowing she was chatting with one of the richest men in America, she forced a smile, trying to keep her voice steady. "So, the usual then?" she asked, pretending nothing had changed. David gave her a knowing look, as if he appreciated her effort to stay normal. "Yes, please." She walked away to put in their order. Whispers filled the air. "That's David Lawson? The billionaire. Why is he here?" Did she know? She's been talking to him for weeks. Emily tried to ignore them, but her hands trembled as she poured coffee. She couldn't believe it. The man she'd seen as a tired father was actually a powerful businessman worth billions. It didn't make sense. He didn't act rich. He didn't brag, didn't dress to show off. He just looked like someone who cared deeply about his son. When she returned to their table, Ethan greeted her with his usual joy. "Emily, Daddy's on the news sometimes," he said proudly. "Did you know that?" She laughed lightly. "No, I didn't. I guess I'm not watching enough TV." David smiled at his son. "He likes to make me sound more important than I am," he said softly. Emily sat down beside Ethan for a moment to help him cut his pancakes. She could feel every pair of eyes in the diner watching them, but she kept her focus on Ethan's smile. "So," she said, "what's new? My little engineer? Built any flying wheelchairs yet? Ethan grinned, chocolate syrup on his cheek. Not yet. But Daddy said I can visit his office soon. That sounds amazing, she said, wiping his chin with a napkin. Just don't forget me when you're famous. David chuckled quietly, and something about the sound made the tension ease. Even though everyone was still staring, the small bubble around the three of them felt calm, safe, and familiar again. The manager, however, was not calm. He hovered near the counter, fidgeting, his face pale. He seemed desperate to impress David now, asking if everything was all right, if they needed special service, if he could bring something more suitable for a man of his stature. At one point, when Emily went to refill their drinks, she overheard him whispering, "Mr. Lawson, sir, I can handle your table personally. Emily is one of our newer servers. She might not be used to guests of your level." Before she could say anything, David set down his cup and looked at the manager sharply. "If she doesn't serve us," he said, his voice calm but firm, "we're leaving." The diner went dead silent. Even the sizzling grill in the kitchen seemed to quiet down. The manager stammered, "Oh, of course, sir. Whatever you prefer." He backed away, red-faced. Emily wanted to sink into the floor. "You didn't have to do that," she whispered. David looked at her gently. "Yes, I did. You've been kind to my son when no one else was. I trust you more than anyone in this room." She didn't know what to say. Her cheeks felt hot, and for a second, she forgot about all the eyes watching her. She just smiled at him and went back to helping Ethan with his food. The rest of the meal passed quietly. When they finished, Ethan handed her a crumpled piece of paper. "I drew you something," he said proudly. She unfolded it and laughed softly. It was a messy drawing of her, Ethan, and David sitting at the diner table. Above their heads, Ethan had written in uneven letters, "My favorite people." Emily felt her throat tighten. "This is beautiful, Ethan. I'll keep it forever." When they finally left, the bodyguards followed them out to the black SUV waiting by the curb. David turned to her before getting in. "Thank you, Emily," he said sincerely, "for treating us like family." She nodded, still a little overwhelmed. "Always," she replied softly. As the SUV drove away, the diner buzzed with chatter. The other waitresses surrounded her with wide eyes. "You were serving a billionaire this whole time." One said, "You could have been rich by now." Emily laughed quietly. "He's just a dad who loves his kid," she said simply. "That's all that matters." But later that night, when she was closing up, she took Ethan's drawing out of her apron pocket and looked at it again. Something about it made her smile in a way she hadn't in years. She thought about David's eyes, the way he looked at her not as a waitress, but as someone who mattered. Maybe he was rich, powerful, and important, but to her, he was just a man who carried pain and love in equal measure. She turned off the diner lights, stepped outside into the cool night air, and took one last look at the road where the SUV had disappeared earlier. Somewhere deep inside, she felt that this wasn't the last time she'd see them. Something told her their story wasn't finished yet. She had no idea how right she was. Days passed slowly for Emily after that unforgettable Saturday. The diner went on as usual: coffee orders, sizzling bacon, and the occasional gossip from regulars, but her mind often drifted to Ethan and his father. She remembered the black SUV, the quiet strength in David's eyes, and the way he had defended her in front of the manager. It felt like a dream she couldn't shake. Life at home, however, was far from peaceful. Her mother's health had worsened slightly, and bills were stacking up faster than her paycheck could cover. Rent was due. Medical expenses were piling, and some days Emily wasn't sure how she would manage. She worked extra shifts whenever she could, but it still wasn't enough. She loved her job, but it wasn't going to solve her problems. One rainy evening, as she was locking the diner after her shift, she noticed an envelope slipped under the door. It was plain, without a stamp, and her name was written in careful, familiar handwriting. Her heart skipped a beat as she tore it open. Inside was a letter. It read simply, "Emily, thank you for everything you have done for Ethan. Your kindness has not gone unnoticed. Please come meet me at my office tomorrow morning. I have something important to discuss with you." Her hands trembled as she read the note over and over. It couldn't be real. Why would David Lawson, billionaire and busy businessman, want to meet her? What could he possibly need from her? The next morning, Emily arrived at Lawson Technologies headquarters, her nerves buzzing. The building was enormous, with glass walls that reflected the morning sun. She felt completely out of place in her simple waitress outfit. Clutching her small purse like a lifeline, a receptionist led her to an elevator that took her up to the top floor. There, David met her personally, looking more casual than she expected. No suits today. Just a plain shirt and jeans, but still carrying that quiet strength she remembered. Ethan was beside him, smiling and waving. "Emily," David said warmly, "thank you for coming." She swallowed hard. "Of course, I wasn't sure why you wanted to see me." David smiled faintly. "I've been thinking a lot about what you've done for my son. How you've treated him with patience and respect, without pity or condescension. That kind of heart is rare." Emily shook her head, embarrassed. "I was just helping him eat. Anyone would do that." "No," he said gently. "Not anyone. Most people don't take the time. Most people see his disability first, not him. You see him as he is, and that is something I can't forget." Emily felt her eyes welling up. She didn't know what to say. David led her into a conference room with a large window overlooking the city. "I'm starting a new charitable foundation," he explained. "It's dedicated to helping children with disabilities and their families, especially single parents. I want someone who truly understands compassion, someone who leads with heart. I want you to head it." Emily froze. "Me? I'm just a waitress. I've never done anything like that before." David's eyes were steady. "Exactly. You haven't been shaped by titles or money. You've been shaped by real life. Struggle, care. You have what it takes. I've seen it in you when you fed my son." She shook her head again. "I don't know if I'm qualified. I could make mistakes." David smiled softly. "You already made the most important thing right. You cared when it mattered. The rest can be learned." Ethan tugged on her hand. "Please say yes, Emily. We need you." Emily laughed through her tears, overwhelmed by the trust in that small boy's eyes. She wanted to run, to hide from such responsibility, but another part of her felt called. She had been struggling to survive, and now someone was giving her a chance to make a difference for countless families like hers. David handed her a folder with papers and plans, showing her the foundation's goals, its structure, and the potential impact. She studied it, trying to absorb every word. The numbers, the people involved, the plans. It was all enormous. And yet he wanted her to lead it. She glanced at him, still unsure. "Are you sure? I mean, it's a huge responsibility." He nodded. "I wouldn't ask if I wasn't. You inspire people, Emily. You remind me why we should do more for others." Emily looked down at the papers, then back at Ethan, who was grinning. Her mind raced. All her life, she had felt stuck working long hours, barely getting by, living paycheck to paycheck. Now, she had an opportunity that could change everything, not just for her, but for families like hers all over the country. Her hand shook slightly as she accepted the folder. I'll do it," she said softly. David's face lit up with a faint, genuine smile. "Thank you," he said. "You won't regret it." "And Ethan?" He looked at his son, who was bouncing with excitement. "You helped make this happen too." Over the next few weeks, Emily's life transformed rapidly. She spent hours learning about the foundation, meeting with advisors, and planning programs to help families of children with disabilities. David mentored her, showing her the ropes of organization, management, fundraising, and public speaking. Ethan often accompanied her to meetings, proudly holding her hand and showing off his little drawings and ideas. Emily's heart swelled with purpose. For the first time, she felt that her struggles, her empathy, and her kindness were not just surviving, they were making a difference. She had found a place where her compassion mattered more than money, more than experience. Despite all the sudden change, she remained humble. She continued to visit the diner sometimes, checking in with old coworkers and making sure they were doing okay. Her mother was happier too, proud of Emily in a way that words could barely express. One afternoon, While sitting in the foundation's office overlooking the city skyline, Emily reflected on how far she had come. She thought about the rainy day she first met David and Ethan. About the tiny gestures that had seemed so small, feeding a little boy, wiping chocolate off his chin, offering a smile. None of it had seemed important at the time, yet those moments had changed everything. David entered the office quietly. "You're doing well," he said, looking at the plans spread across her desk. "Better than I could have imagined?" Emily smiled, still feeling a bit nervous. "It's a lot," she admitted. "But it feels right," he nodded. "That's because it is. You're making a difference, Emily, and you're helping me make the world a little better too." Ethan ran in, holding a small model airplane. "Look what I built," he shouted. "For the flying wheelchair project?" Emily laughed, taking the little plane. "This is perfect, Ethan. Maybe one day we'll actually see it fly." The three of them sat together, laughing and talking, and for a moment it felt like the world had stopped. A simple act of kindness, the way Emily had fed Ethan that first day, had led to this moment. A life changed, a new purpose found, and a family formed not by blood, but by care, trust, and love. Emily knew life wouldn't be easy. There would be challenges, mistakes, and hard decisions. But for the first time, she felt truly empowered. She had been given a chance to do something meaningful, to help others the way she had helped Ethan, and that realization filled her with hope, pride, and a sense of belonging she had never felt before. As she looked out the window, watching the city below, she knew this was only the beginning. The foundation, David, Ethan, they had all become part of her life in ways she could never have imagined, and she was ready for whatever came next. Months passed, and Emily's life had changed in ways she could never have imagined. The small waitress who once spent long hours scrubbing tables and serving coffee was now leading a growing charitable foundation. The work was demanding meetings, planning, fundraising, but every challenge felt meaningful. She was helping children with disabilities, supporting struggling parents, and creating opportunities that she knew could change lives. For the first time, she felt that her efforts truly mattered. Ethan often accompanied her to the foundation's offices. He loved showing people around, proudly introducing her as my favorite person and explaining their projects with the seriousness only a child could manage. David, too, was deeply involved. He mentored Emily, offering advice when she faced difficult decisions. And his support gave her confidence she didn't know she had. Together, the three of them had become a kind of family connected not by blood, but by trust, care, and shared purpose. Even with all the changes, Emily stayed humble. She still visited the diner from time to time, checking in on her old coworkers, laughing at familiar jokes, and sharing stories about the foundation's work. She wanted to remind herself of where she came from, and she wanted others to know that kindness could lead to big things, even from small beginnings. One bright morning, Emily was preparing for a major event, a fundraiser for the foundation that would bring in donors and supporters from across the country. She had spent weeks organizing it, coordinating with David, and planning activities for the children who would attend. As she walked through the venue, ensuring everything was in place, Ethan tugged at her hand. "Look, Emily," he said, holding a stack of colorful drawings. "These are for the kids coming today. I made sure everyone has a picture of our team." Emily smiled warmly, feeling a rush of pride. "These are amazing, Ethan. You've done a wonderful job." David appeared beside them, watching the interaction with a quiet smile. "You know," he said softly, "this reminds me of the first day we met you at the diner. You took care of my son with patience and kindness. That small act started all of this." Emily glanced at him, surprised. "All of this?" David nodded. "Yes. You fed a little boy pancakes, and your heart showed. I've seen people with money, people with power, but very few have what you have. You've taught me more about compassion than any meeting or report ever could." Emily felt her throat tighten. "I was just doing what felt right," she whispered. "No," David said firmly. "You changed lives." "You changed mine?" The event began, and the room filled with laughter, conversation, and hope. Children played in one corner, parents spoke with volunteers. And Emily moved gracefully through the crowd, ensuring everyone felt welcome. Donors were impressed, not just by the organization's work, but by the heart and authenticity Emily brought to every interaction. People could feel that she genuinely cared as the day went on. A photographer approached Emily, asking if she would give a brief speech. She hesitated for a moment, her nerves rising, but then she looked at Ethan and the smiling children around her. She realized that this was why she was here, not for recognition, not for praise, but for the chance to make a difference. Taking a deep breath, she stepped onto the small stage. "Hello, everyone," she began, her voice steady. "I want to tell you a story. A story about a little boy, his father, and a small act of kindness that changed everything." She shared how she had met Ethan at the diner, how she had helped him with his meals, and how, without realizing it, that small act had connected her to David and led to the creation of the foundation. The audience listened intently, many moved to tears. Emily spoke honestly, humbly, and with emotion, and when she finished, the applause was heartfelt. Later that evening, David approached her, standing beside the children as they laughed and played. "You did wonderfully," he said. "You've reminded everyone why kindness matters." Emily smiled softly, feeling a warmth she hadn't felt in years. "I couldn't have done it without Ethan. He's the heart of this foundation." David knelt down to Ethan's level. "And you've been amazing, buddy," he said. "You helped us all see what really matters." As the night wound down, Emily took a moment to look around the room. Volunteers were cleaning up, parents were chatting happily, and children ran with painted faces and small prizes. She felt a deep sense of fulfillment. All the struggles, all the long shifts at the diner, all the nights worrying about bills they had led her here. To a place where her compassion had real power, she thought about her mother, who had supported her through every difficulty, and she felt gratitude swell in her heart. She thought about David and Ethan, who had become her family in unexpected ways. And she thought about herself, the waitress who had once felt stuck in a small life, who now had the chance to impact countless others. Later, as the venue emptied, David pulled Emily aside. "I want you to know something," he said quietly. "This foundation exists because of you. Not because of money, not because of power, but because of your heart. You reminded me that what we give to others is the greatest wealth we can have." Emily's eyes filled with tears. "I never expected any of this," she said softly. He smiled. "You didn't need to. You just needed to be yourself." Ethan ran up, clutching her hand. "Emily, I'm proud of you. You're my hero." She laughed, hugging him tightly. "And you're mine, little guy?" That night, as she walked home under the soft glow of streetlights, Emily reflected on how life had changed. She had gone from a struggling waitress, unsure if she could pay rent, to a woman who was leading a foundation, helping families, and making the world a little brighter. And it all began with a single moment, a simple act of kindness over a plate of pancakes. Emily knew the journey wasn't over. There would be challenges ahead, new problems to solve, and difficult decisions to make. But she also knew something powerful, that small acts of love, patience, and care could ripple through lives in ways no one could imagine. She had seen it firsthand, and she was living proof. She smiled, thinking of Ethan and David, of the families she now helped, and of the countless small acts of kindness waiting to be discovered in the world. Her life had changed forever, and yet, somehow, it felt like everything had come together exactly as it was meant to. As she looked up at the stars twinkling in the night sky, Emily whispered softly to herself, "Kindness really is the greatest gift of all." And in that moment, she knew, without a doubt, that she would continue to give it, every day, for the rest of her life.